I've never felt like I was enough. It's the same story you've probably heard from so many others before me. When I was presented with what I wanted to do with my life versus what I should probably do with my life, I decided to go the route of joining the rat race because it meant food on the table and the slim chance of having enough income to fund what I really wanted to do. Too bad there's absolutely no sculpting work in Cheyenne, Colorado, which is where I'm from. Being enrolled at the Laramie Community College with an accounting major certainly isn't something that's filling the missing part of myself that seems to keep growing every day. Neither is being stuck driving for Uber to pay for it all. Knowing that money could go towards materials, a promoter, or fees to have my work featured at expos over in Denver, but is instead going towards tuition, books, and whatever new software program my professors make us buy, which are only ever used for one semester and never touched again, it kills me inside. Especially if it means dealing with all the nonsense I face every day at work. Whether it's rude customers, unprompted one-star ratings, or people leaving garbage in my car. I question why I decided to make driving strangers my means for getting through college in the first place. For every pleasant conversation or good joke, I get about 30 of the aforementioned instances and then some. One night, no matter how much Z-Quil I took, it was impossible for me to sleep. I guess I once again threw myself into another one of my existential spirals, where I began to ask myself over and over if I would ever be where I wanted to be in life. I know we've all had those moments, but mine seem to get uglier and uglier the older I get. For those of you who don't know, when you drive for Uber, you're given the option of participating in a promotion each week. For instance, if you make 50 trips, you're given $200, or if you drive 70 trips, you make $300, and so on. That night, as I lay awake in bed, knowing I was only a good 5 trips away from making an extra $350, I figured I could get up, get those rides in, and maybe even take a few days off. Lord knows waking up at 4 a.m. every morning makes you appreciate those on a level you never had before. With that, I grabbed my keys and headed out to work. Fast forward 3.5 hours later. I was in the middle of taking my last customer of the night to his mountainside cabin, having picked him up from Denver. On one hand, I hated these trips because they always took you far out and away from literally everywhere else. On the other hand, they were always a guaranteed hefty fare. Plus, usually there was a darn good tip. If only I had half the dough these cabin owners had. Plus, they were great for turning your brain off and enjoying the drive, since you wouldn't be on the busy city streets. But tonight, that meant another existential crisis in the form of picturing everyone from high school being in better places than me, actually having moved on and out of Cheyenne. Thank God the trip was almost over, so I could try and blast some music to drown out my thoughts. I dropped off my customer, who generously gave me a $30 cash tip. Upon receiving it, I had to promise myself not to blow half of it on lotto tickets again. I said goodnight and put in the directions back home. That Z-Quil may have kicked in later than it should have, and it may have been 3 in the morning, but at least I made my promotion, and I had a tank's worth of gas money in my pocket. I looked out the window at the full moon, then below at the city lights in the distance, and at the miles of woods that surrounded me. I thought to myself, if I had to be stuck in some backwoods town with a 4-digit population, at least it's one as gorgeous as this. Driving down a mountain when your eyelids feel like they're 100 pounds each, it's a position you don't want to find yourself in, unless you want to unintentionally give in to that urge to jump when you're standing on the edge of a cliff. But a roll of the window is always just the trick for me. I look down for literally 1 second to find the window switch, and crash. I screamed from the sudden noise and the simultaneous thud. I saw a large mass roll away from the front of my car at immeasurable speed, stopping in the middle of the road. I took a second to collect myself. At that moment, I thanked my lucky stars that I had full coverage on my car. After taking a second to breathe, I came to the realization that whatever I hit was probably dead, judging from its lack of movement. Figuring leaving a dead deer in the middle of a downward mountain road could mean life or death for a different driver, I got out of the car to drag it off the road. After briefly analyzing the damage to my bumper and hood, I turned to move the deer to the side of the road. At about 30 feet away, I thought to myself, good thing I'm moving this guy. I can barely see it from here. As I walked, I took notice of something. This deer looked to have black fur. Nothing unheard of, I thought. Nothing I'd ever personally seen before, but surely it wasn't an impossibility. At 20 feet away, I began to understand that this was not a deer. This animal was absolutely massive. Judging it from that distance, all splayed out on the ground as it was, it could easily clock in at 7 or 8 feet in length. Is it a grizzly bear? I wondered to myself. A really dark-furred grizzly bear. That had to be what I hit. I've never once heard of a grizzly bear encounter in Colorado. 10 feet away, I could see scraggly fur and pointed ears. This wasn't a bear either. So what the heck did I hit? Then I saw it move. I stopped. This creature got up as if from waking up from a long nap, showing no physical evidence of getting hit by a 2,000-pound vehicle at 30 miles an hour. It stood up on its hind legs and faced me. I know I'm not crazy. The full moon was out on a cloudless night. This was not a case of me seeing things. What stared me down was 8 feet tall, with blood-red eyes and teeth and claws that would put a grizzly bear's to shame. My heart felt as if it stopped. We both just stood there, frozen in time. Then it hit me. There's no way in the world I was looking at what I thought I was looking at. If what I was thinking was true, I began to wonder how we were treating these things as mere legends all this time. I refused to believe that what I was looking at was actually there. But that didn't change the fact that it was. There were so many unnatural things about this creature. From standing on paws like a wolf, but wielding arms like a man. But above all else, the beast looked so demonic. The crazed look in its beady eyes and the way it snarled, with a twisted face, an expression of such malice, it just made it seem like something someone would only see in hell itself. I instinctively uttered, "Jesus Christ." The beast instinctively blinked. I foolishly wondered if, perhaps like with demonic possession, the uttering of Jesus' name would be enough to ward off the creature. Just above a whisper, I say, "Jesus," again. I had visualized what would happen so easily. It would grimace, shake its head, then just run off into the woods. But I was dead wrong. Instead, I swear that thing smiled at me. The most hideous and deranged smile I've ever seen or ever will see, as if it was amused by the name. Slowly, I took a step back, keeping eye contact. I'd recalled this from my time spent at summer camp when I was a kid. Keep eye contact and don't break into a run and panic. The creature mirrored my actions, taking a step towards me. I took 2 steps back. It took 2 steps forward. Then I got an idea. I took a step to the side and 2 steps back, but the creature just took 2 steps forward, drool dripping from its fangs. Then I gathered the courage and took 1 step forward, and the creature didn't move. Then I turned and sprinted to the car, hearing massive footsteps sprinting behind me. What happened next only took maybe 3 seconds to transpire, but it felt as if an eternity passed. As I was 20 feet away from the car, its steps were loud and powerful. I could feel the earth shaking beneath its feet. At 10 feet away, the power in its step was cut in half, but its speed had tripled as I heard it drop from 2 legs to 4. 5 feet away, I stick my arm out to close the car door, which, thank God, I left it open. I could feel hot breath on the back of my neck. I forced myself to ignore the sense of smell, with the strong stench of carrion protruding from behind its teeth. I jumped into my car, slamming the door shut and locking it. But the beast was so close to me, I slammed its muzzle before closing the door. And it didn't like that. Not one bit. I only realized the true terror of what happened next later on. The creature tried to open my door with the handle. The fact that I was facing a creature with such strength, speed, and senses, now paired with the sentience of a man, would later make my blood run cold. It punched its massive clawed fist through the window, breaking it. I shifted into drive and floored the gas pedal, almost causing my transmission to slip. I screeched away from the creature, more shaken up than I've ever been my entire life. I've had to hide in my cellar from tornadoes when I was a kid, and I've had a close encounter with a child predator, but nothing has left my core as brittle as this. As I sped away, I thought I was safe, but I was dead wrong. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw two glowing red eyes following me. This monster was still chasing me. On all fours, it had no problem keeping up. I pressed harder on the gas, going 60 now. I flashed back to hearing about a classmate in high school who died in a crash after going 50 on a downward mountainside road. The beast went from directly behind my car to right next to me. I was going 70 then. I sped up to 80, and it still showed no difficulty keeping up with me. It was so close to me now, with no glass window any longer to offer even the most pathetic and ineffective barrier between me and it. I saw those red eyes up close. I'm not sure if it was anger, hatred, or hunger that was behind those eyes, but whatever it was, I was sure it was evil. I knew I had to focus on the road. Going down a mountainside at 80 miles per hour was practically guaranteed death, so I knew I needed to focus. I was cautious and crept up to 90, but the beast kept up. Granted, it looked like it was taking an effort to do so, but nothing that wasn't doable for this monster. The trees and the rocks were flying past me then. I swear if I had let this monster startle me in any way and have my arms twitch in reaction, I would have flown off the edge of that mountain. The road began to curve to the left. I had to slow down. If I didn't, I would certainly die. I had no choice but to push down on the brake. The beast caught up again and began to snap its jaws through the window, its viscous drool flying into my face with each chomp. Then, a miracle. Before I had time to even mentally process that it was there, an 18-wheel semi-truck appeared. It was passing through the oncoming lane, previously hidden by the curve of the mountainside. The beast noticed and moved away as much as it could, but we were both going so fast it could only go so far. It slowed down and moved a bit to the right, but the truck hit it. I watched it launch into the air like a rag doll. I gave a nervous laugh of relief. If given more time to actually let everything that happened sink in, I would have cried. I thought to myself that this would make a heck of a story to tell, a story that, little did I know at the time, had hardly begun. A few minutes passed, and while I may have lost the creature, I was still driving way too fast down the mountain to avoid any chance of it catching up. Unfortunately, I had forgotten about a really deep-looking puddle that I remembered spotting on the way up the mountain. Before I knew it, water shot up from the sides of my car, and any control I had was lost. I crashed into the metal barrier, and by some work of God, I was going slow enough that I didn't end up catapulting myself over the edge of the mountain. After collecting myself for what felt like the millionth time in the past half hour, I knew that my car was definitely screwed now, judging by all the warning lights that went off. I got out of my car and didn't even bother to look at the damage. I took out my phone, screenshotting my coordinates, and figured I'd call my insurance company tomorrow. I looked at how far away I was from my house, and to my surprise, I was only a 5-mile walk away from my own place. I lived right at the edge of the woods that I was standing right in front of, so I made the decision to walk home. I just wanted to keep moving, get home as soon as possible, rather than wait around in my car for a tow truck, playing with the chance of that creature finding me again. So into the woods I went. 2 hours later, I had about a mile to a mile and a half left of walking before I had reached my house. I was still having trouble comprehending everything that went down on that mountain. Was I understanding this right? Werewolves are real. Why did it want to kill me so bad? Is that trucker that hit it okay? Questions I could only ask myself every 20 minutes or so. If I thought about them for too long, then every sound I heard in the distance would have my heart beating out of my chest all over again. I decided that what's over is over, and that I would focus my thoughts on literally anything else. So I began to think about which TV dinner I would heat up when I got home. Lord knows I wouldn't be able to sleep. As I walked, I noticed something. The crickets, owls, and every other woodland animal went completely silent all at once. The other takeaway I got from summer camp came crashing down on me. If everything just went silent, There's a good chance that means a predator is nearby. Then I heard it. The sound that will haunt my nightmares for the rest of my life. The loudest, most unholy howl echoed through the woods. This was nothing like any wolf howl, or even those found in your typical werewolf movies. This sounded so unnatural, so pained, almost as if the beast had taken a spear to the heart. I stopped dead in my tracks, feeling my heart sink into my stomach while doing so, because that howl didn't sound very far away. I stood still for a moment. Then, without thinking, I just took off into a run. Back on the mountain, everything happened so fast and so suddenly, I didn't have time to process everything that went down. I was numbed with the adrenaline combined with fight-or-flight instinct, but now that I'd calmed down at least some, and I knew that it was approaching, my mind began to run along with me. It had found me. It had survived a hit from a semi-truck, and it found me. It must have caught my scent, and went out of its way to hunt me down. Another howl, so much closer then, even with thick woods to navigate through, and an infinite number of low-hanging branches to dodge. This monster was making serious ground at an alarming rate. 1 second I was running, the next I was on my back, blood dripping down my face. It took a second for me to comprehend what happened in the haze I was in, but I quickly figured out I'd run straight into one of the lower hanging branches. I slowly got up. Things were quiet, but not as quiet as before. I looked to my side. There was a waterfall, maybe 30 feet in height, about 10 feet from me, and a rather rapidly flowing river at the bottom of it. For a second, the broken silence calmed me down. Then I heard a deep and guttural growl. If pure malice and malevolence could be brought to life through sound, that's exactly what I heard. And it wasn't a short growl lasting a second or two. No, this went on for what felt like minutes, growing more and more aggressive. I knew that running was no longer an option. I only had 2 realistic ways out of this: jump down into the river, or climb up the tree that just knocked me down. I had no idea how deep the river was, but if it was too shallow, or if I jumped and landed funnily, I knew 30 feet would mess me up bad enough that I would have no chance of making it out of the woods alive. With that, I jumped as high as I could, grabbing a branch above the one I ran into and pulling myself up. Immediately after doing so, the beast leapt out and would have tackled me on the spot if I'd waited any longer. I started to climb the tree, praying all the while that this thing wouldn't follow me up. How wrong I was. With absolute ease, the creature began climbing, following me up the tree. It moved slower when climbing, so I did have more of a chance of getting away, but it was still way faster than I could go. I looked down at it and saw it was closing in on me. I saw bits of fabric hanging from its teeth and prayed that that wasn't from the trucker. Out in the open with no car, flight was no longer a viable option. Then I sprouted quite possibly the craziest idea I've ever had. With no more than a second's worth of planning, I jumped off the branch I was on, pulling my knees in as close to my chest as possible. Then, at the last second, I shot my legs out as straight and as fast as I could, right before I would have landed on the creature. Somehow, despite it outweighing me at least 3-1, I was able to knock it out of the tree. The thing tumbled to the ground and rolled right off the cliff into the rapids down below. Miraculously, I was able to grab onto a branch after kicking it to avoid the same fate, getting my hands covered in tree sap. The water below was moving so fast, I only caught a glimpse of it being swept away in the distance. I let go of the branch, coming down much harder than anticipated, hard enough that I felt it in my stomach. But my only goal was to get the heck out of there as soon as possible. So that's what I did. I pressed forward, traumatized to the point of mental and emotional numbness. The beast may have been gone, but everything about it was still haunting me, right on down to the darkest, deepest corners of my psyche. Every sound I heard was a howl. Every little reflection of light was those ungodly eyes. Even the memory of the reek of its breath had made permanent residence in my nostrils. After what felt like an eternity to my feet, yet only a minute to my mind, I made it out of the woods. And there it was, home. Even the immovable feelings of misery and dissatisfaction that plagued me in that house during the waking hours of the day were completely non-existent then. and in their place stood sanctuary and safety. The fall from the branch from before left my ankle sore, so I shambled into my house as quickly as my entry allowed. Now, there's a field between my house and the woods that stretches about a half a football field. I was maybe 3/4 of the way there when I felt it. At that point, it was unmistakable. In hindsight, maybe I had heard footsteps before, but I'll never know for sure. When I turned around, there it was, standing on its hind legs. I saw how heavy it was breathing, even from that distance that I was at. It was then that I knew that this creature did not seek me for hunger, but out of hatred. Just as before, we just stood there, only for a moment. This time, it made the first move, dropping onto all fours and running as quickly as it could towards me. I still believe, when writing this, that the adrenaline that exploded inside me at that moment was enough to suppress the injury I sustained not even an hour ago, and it was nothing short of divine intervention. I ran to my back door. The beast was practically on top of me in no time. I knew my door was locked, but I also knew where the key was hidden. I ran up to the door and picked up the potted plant next to the door. I know it's not the smartest place to keep your spare key, but in a small town like this, there really wasn't much need for top-of-the-line security. I knew I wouldn't have time to unlock the door, so I did something which may have turned out to be a mistake. It was either be torn to pieces or get mad, so I chose the latter. I took the pot and threw it straight at the monster's face. By then it was only 10 feet from me, so it was by no means a lucky shot. It definitely wasn't expecting it. It whipped back after impact. I used the precious seconds I had now while it was stunned to get inside my house. I turned around, beginning to close the door. I got it just 3 inches from closing when something began to push on it from outside. That creature was far stronger than me. It was able to inch the door open against me. I knew that I couldn't win this. I took the chain lock, and right in the nick of time, I was able to latch it onto the keeper, stopping the door from inching any farther. The beast, however, wasted no time. It used the entire mass of its body to bang against the door. The first hit shook the dust from the top of the door frame. The second one made the keeper on the wall loosen. Between that and its next hit, I closed the door and locked it. It hit against the door a third time, but nothing happened. Fourth hit, nothing. After a fifth and unsuccessful hit, the onslaught stopped. I dared not look out the window to see if it had given up. The mere sight of me just seemed to anger the creature. I made my way upstairs to the second floor to peek out the window behind the curtains of my bedroom. Halfway up, I nearly had a heart attack. A loud crash penetrated the short-lived silence in the air. The darned thing must have burst through my kitchen window. With no time to recover from the fright, I ran up the stairs and into my room, where I kept my .38 Special revolver for home defense. I made it to my room, closed and locked the door. Then I hurried to my bedside table drawer and pulled out my gun. After turning off the safety, I checked, and it was loaded. I heard all sorts of furniture crashing and glass breaking downstairs. I figured if that's keeping it content for now, so be it. But of course, it didn't. It came for one thing, and that seemed to be me. I heard it slowly stomp its way up my stairs. I could tell it was on its hind legs then, judging by the speed and weight at which it was moving. Memories of me cowering at the very thought of the boogeyman when I was a kid came rushing back to me, as I now hid in my room, trembling on the verge of tears in fear. It broke down the door to my study room, trashing it much like it did downstairs. Then the bathroom door was broken. It knew I was up here. I knew that even with all 6 rounds, a creature that big and that ferocious would not easily be taken down. And with the way it seemed to just brush off getting hit by a car, launched by a semi-truck, and falling down a cliff and into rapid waters, 6 little bullets at best could briefly incapacitate it, I guessed. I knew I was dead. This thing was going to knock down every door to find me. If I was lucky, I'd get in 4, maybe 5 shots before it ripped me apart. Then I remembered my room was directly above the steel cellar doors outside my home, but if I did what I had in mind, there truly would be no other option left. All I could do after that would be to pray that this beast had had enough for the night and simply go away. As it knocked down the door to my storage room, I tucked the revolver between my belt and waist and opened my bedroom window. I stuck my feet out first and dropped myself to the ground. That burst of adrenaline from earlier had long gone, and my already messed up ankle got hurt even further. I stumbled to my cellar doors and opened them. I looked up, seeing the beast sticking its head out my window, sniffing around. It stopped, then looked down, spotting me. With a grisly snarl, it brandished bloody teeth. I almost froze then. It went back inside, and I knew it was then or never. I closed the cellar doors and locked them shut. I could hear from outside the creature burst through the window, crashing down on the ground in front of the cellar. Once again, it began banging against the doors. This cellar was meant to withstand Category 4 tornadoes, but even those monstrous storms were natural. I wish I could tell you how many times that thing bashed itself against the cellar doors, but I honestly lost track after 40. By then, the doors had already begun to bend. That memory acts as my idea of hell. A creature with nothing more than a hunger for your blood to be spilled, slowly breaking its way into where you're hiding, afraid, knowing that it's a matter of time, not a matter of if. Suddenly, there was a pause. A minute passed, and after having a second to figure out what to do with my fear, I decided to heck with it. I've never felt as if I'd done enough with my life, and I decided then, for once in my life, I was going to take control and prove to myself that I had it in me to not let something keep me down. I would take this quiet moment to catch the creature by surprise. It seemed as if one of us had to die for this to end, and I was going to do whatever it took for that not to be me. I burst open the cellar doors, raising my gun, ready to aim and ready to fire, but the creature was gone. I frantically looked around, even back up at my bedroom window. It wasn't there any longer. Then I noticed the dawn had broke. Sweet, sweet sunlight had started shining over the tops of the trees, overtaking the dark of the night. A sight I truly never thought I'd ever see again. I tumbled to the ground, crying with relief. I had survived. That day, I took care of my car, filing a home insurance claim too, referring to the incident as a break-in. I checked myself into a hotel about a mile away from my house. My house would be under repair for the next week, so my insurance company provided free lodging while repairs were underway. At the front desk, the person working there asked me if it mattered where I stayed, and his question made me wonder. I asked if I could be put into a top-floor room. After assuring them that my ankle injury was nothing more than a sprain, and that I would have no problem getting up there, I made my way to my room, where for the first time in years, I had no trouble throwing myself in bed and going right to sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night. I got up and looked out the window. Despite the long distance, I was almost certain that I saw a dot moving around my house. I shrugged it off, knowing there's no way to be certain what it was from that distance. Before I turned away, I heard what could easily be mistaken as a train whistle. But I knew in my gut what that sound was. That was a howl. And almost as if to reassure me that it was a howl, as soon as I heard it, the dot made its way back into the woods behind my house. That was enough for me to start looking at cheap, out-of-state apartments. Hopefully, where this monster won't find me. The story I'm about to tell you happened a while back. I was probably about 8 years old then. It was a chilly night in the middle of November. The leaves outside were swaying with the wind, which had been making a faint howling noise just outside the house. I was finding it very difficult to fall asleep, as the atmosphere was quite loud. After a few hours, when I finally did doze off, I had a horrible dream. In it, I had been running from something. I couldn't see what it was, mostly because whatever the thing was made me too scared to look at it. But I heard the creature speak.
No matter how fast you run, I'll always catch you.
After it said this, I woke up in a cold sweat, breathing heavily. Once I finally calmed down, I lay there for about 5 minutes straight, just rethinking that nightmare. I just shrugged it off as a meaningless bad dream. I started to get up to get some water. As I tried to sit my body up, none of my limbs were moving. No matter how hard I tried, I just could not move. It was then that I noticed a dark figure in my doorway. At first, I thought it was my mother, but it was far too tall to be her. I closed my eyes tight, because that's all I could really do at the moment. I thought it was gone then, but I was wrong. I opened my eyes once more. The creature was just inches from my face now, squatting at the side of my bed that was facing the door. I couldn't really make out any facial features as my room was too dark. This thing just looked like a solid shadow. Just a moment after the thing came up to my bed, a putrid smell of rot hit my nostrils hard. It was like a dead animal had been lying right under my nose. I tried to let out a scream, but still I could not move at all, except for my eyes. Then something happened that, to this day, sends chills down my spine. The creature spoke.
Now you can't run.
I shut my eyes as tightly as I could, and I kept them shut for what felt like hours. After a while, the rotting smell left my senses, and I felt alone again. I opened my eyes to find nothing, and I could finally move. I ran from my room, quickly, sprinting down the hall and into my parents' room. I jumped into their bed to sleep the rest of the night. When I awoke the next morning, I told my mom at the table while eating breakfast about the occurrence last night. She just let it off as my imagination, but I knew it hadn't been. After breakfast, I walked into my room to find charred footprints in my carpet, right in front of my bed.
I'm about to tell you about a horrifying encounter that began one foggy Christmas Eve, when Santa did not come down the chimney, but instead, something else did. At the time, my aunt was staying with us. She reported that she heard someone trying to break into her basement around 3 a.m. on Christmas Eve. She said that she thought someone had used the bathroom, and at first she thought it was one of us. But we all denied this at breakfast. We includes my sister, husband, and I. Auntie said that the person trying to break into her room rattled her door handle and tried to walk over to her bed, scaring her to the core. We all laughed, saying maybe it was Santa, due to the date of the alleged break-in, which was Christmas Eve. My mother also read that Christmas Eve is a common time for break-ins, due to all the valuable gifts lying about. My aunt said it definitely wasn't Santa, and that the person trying to break into her room was neither jolly nor fat, but was in fact a woman. My aunt said that there was a faint smell of rosewater oil and stale flowers on the veil of the person trying to break into her room, a visitor from beyond the grave. Wait a minute, I thought. The figure was wearing a bridal veil? How macabre. To witness a spectral figure wearing a wispy veil laden with freshly dug earth and smelling of graveyard flowers, trying to enter your room in the middle of the night. Nevertheless, I dismissed Auntie's words as the superstitions of an older woman. The next night, following Christmas, I awoke at the witching hour, just like my aunt had. I looked over at my red digital alarm clock that read 1 a.m. Usually I don't wake up at this time, unless I've been roused from deep sleep by a noise or something. This time, something had definitely awoke me. I heard my door handle rattling, as if someone was trying to force themselves in. And then I heard a group of voices, multiple voices, a male and a female.
Should we break it? Quick, grab the handle.
The male and female voice whispered to each other. From my bed in the dark, I was terrified. I pulled the covers up over my face. I prayed that these
people would not come in, assuming it might be related to what my aunt had seen. The door handle rattled loudly one more time, and I could actually see it moving and twisting there. But then the figures disappeared, and everything went quiet. The odd part about this is that my door wasn't even locked, so they, whoever they were, could have come in if they really wanted to. The next day, my mom, concerned and encouraged by our stories of what appeared to be a break-in to her, called the local police, asking if they had heard of a string of thefts in the area on Christmas Eve. The police said that they hadn't heard of any residential break-ins occurring in the area. Of course, this makes me wonder, who were they? These figures or entities who rattled doorknobs and whispered to each other in the black of night on Christmas Eve. You'd think it was a holy night, right? Or is the night open for strange things like this to come in? My mom did agree to contact a spiritualist who had been to our house before. A smudge session and cleansing was conducted. The spiritualist said the place had had a very dark energy, Christmas Eve or not.
I was at my grandfather's farm, which is on Native American land in Wisconsin. My dad had made jokes about the farm being an old Indian burial ground, which now I kind of believe. This supernatural thing I encountered that night heavily unsettled me, as now I know that past experiences my dad and uncle had with supposed wendigos and skinwalkers might be true. Now, on to what happened. I had just finished up shuffling corn silage into our blower, heading up to my dad's old square-body truck to drive over to mine to work on it. I drove over there and got the treble light out, plugged it in, and popped the hood on my truck. I just hung the treble light on my hood when I heard the cows bellowing. Now, I would have shaken this off as normal, but it was coming from the direction of our fields. I drove my dad's truck down to the barn to tell him. He then told me to go check the gates to see if the cows had ripped them down. But the gates were still up. I had the truck running with the lights on, and I shut it off. The same bellowing noises came from the fields, only now more distorted. Like it wasn't coming from cattle, it was coming from something trying to imitate the cows. It was too high-pitched, it almost sounded like it was crackling. I went ahead and drove my dad's truck back up to my truck. I put the light away and closed up the big steel shed my truck was next to. All the while, the sounds of those quote-unquote cows got more distorted, like some sort of unnatural animal both breathing and screaming very loudly. The bellows were happening in quick succession. This wasn't normal. Our cows never sounded like that. I was walking back to my dad's truck when I heard possibly the most unsettling sounds in about 5 seconds. From 2 different directions came 2 loud screams, not ear-piercing, but still plenty loud. Then, from the same direction that the cow sounds had come from, I heard coyotes howling. I bolted to the truck and hit the gas, not wanting to find out what could mimic cows and coyotes. I told my dad about it, and he asked what it was. I just told him I would tell him in the truck. Then he did what I didn't want him to do. He began to say, "Oh, skinwalker, a skinwalker." I yelled at him not to say its name. Eventually, we went back to the shed. Our farmyard isn't too big. From the shed where my truck is to the barn can't be more than 25 yards. But eventually, we went back up there with my grandpa's truck. Once there, my dad swapped the receiver hitch so we could hook it up to a kickbale wagon that my grandpa was going to bring back to our neighbors in the morning. I didn't want to be there much longer, so this didn't make anything at all better. Now, what makes everything about this story worse is that we have these stereotypical tall cornfields. It's good for business this year. They're probably 12 feet high in some places, but I hate the fact that something could be hiding in there so easily. I'm sorry if the writing was sloppy, but I'm really shaken up by this, and I'm probably not in the right headspace. If I encounter anything more regarding this, I'll let you know. Now, if you're still wondering about what my dad and uncle might have seen, I can tell you here. The story goes that it was the early 2000s. My dad and his older brother were out cutting firewood around late fall or early winter. It would get dark around that time, around 4:30 p.m. My uncle alerted my dad to something chasing deer across the field and on a hill. Whatever it was gaining on the deer, and according to my dad, it looked half wolf and half ape. So yeah, that's that. Not sure if that would be a Wendigo or a skinwalker. The worst part about all this is that the cows were up near our cow yard, which was near the fields, and to me it seemed like something was out there, trying to communicate with them, trying to lure one or more away. Our cows aren't allowed out in our fields either, so this really scared me, and while writing this, I just heard breathing through my AC in my room. So, yeah, maybe I'll just go cry now.